Jose Mourinho in joyous mood after clinching Manchester United's place in the FA Cup semi-finals, or so he would have thought. But it wasn't the case. He chose that moment to single out Luke Shaw for yet more criticism. Ryan, what do you think he's up to?
I'm not too sure what he's up to, but I think it's clear to see that he's not a fan of Luke Shaw as a player. I think it's vitally important for Luke to get out and start playing games and enjoy football again, because at the moment it looks as though he's scared on the football pitch. He doesn't have any freedom, and that's very difficult for a footballer to have a good game if you feel like that.
Do you think that, Matt, is a relationship breaker? Or have you been here before?
I don't think, personally, those comments are the worst comments that he's made about Luke Shaw. I think there's been previous ones that have probably been more hurtful. I think it's the build-up of these comments and then him to openly criticise him again is what's led to this being a topic that we're discussing. I feel that those comments he made, he was asked a direct question and he gave a reason as to why he made a substitution, and you know, he's entitled to do that as the manager, even if it does cause some collateral with a player if he chooses that. But I just feel the build-up with the criticism over time after time after time, it's so clear, like Ryan said, that he's not a player that's going to feature for Jose Mourinho, and it's time for him to go and kind of start his career again for me.
Interesting word, that collateral. How much collateral has there been caused by this, Jason?
I think quite a lot, to be honest. I think there has been a cumulative effect on Shaw himself, and I think there is concern about how his own sort of state of mind as much as anything else. I mean, this constant criticism has worn him down to a degree. And I also wonder the effect it's also had in the dressing room to the other players, how they feel about it and whether they are a bit uncomfortable with the constant criticism of Shaw. To be fair to Mourinho, he has criticised other players, but it always comes back to Luke Shaw with him, with this Manchester United team. And I think the other effect is on the club as well, because, listen, if they're going to have to sell this player, they'll want a substantial transfer fee for him. If the manager keeps talking about him in this way, who's going to pay a substantial transfer fee? So if they want to cut their losses and let him go in the summer, it would help them if he stopped criticising. As a journalist, in many ways, it's fascinating for us because he's explaining his decisions, as Matt's already alluded to. You know, he's going out and he's given us quite an honest answer in his own appraisal, and that's quite interesting. My mind goes back to an incident many years ago with Joe Cole when I was in the press room at Stamford Bridge and Mourinho just arrived, only his 10th game as Chelsea manager. And he basically killed Joe Cole. Joe Cole scored the winning goal against Liverpool, and we went in there, man of the match, we went in there saying, Joe Cole, great performance. He went, no, scored a goal, did nothing else after that. And you're thinking, wow, this was different, this was new, this was refreshing. Unfortunately now, it's become quite tiresome with Mourinho because the constant criticism of one player and it's going nowhere.
I think it's different when you criticise a player and they've put in a stack of performances that can carry somewhere. Luke Shaw hasn't done that, so his confidence and his stock at the club is so low that to actually openly criticise him again, I find it hard to think where the positive's going to come from that.
And what reaction are you going to get from him?
Yeah, and Ryan mentioned earlier about enjoying your football. I mean, it's so important. You can't play your best football unless you're really enjoying it, you're comfortable, you feel relaxed in the knowledge about what your job is and what you need to do. And he clearly doesn't have that picture at Manchester United, which is such a tough club to forge a career as a young player anyway.
Well, there have been some suggestions in one or two papers this evening, that this has caused this dressing room unrest. Why would that be the case, Ryan?
Well, I think as a player, if you're going into games feeling worried about making mistakes because of the manager coming out in the press criticising your performance, then I don't think it is good. I mean, like Matt said, Luke's a young player. He's young, he's low on confidence, and off the back of a bad performance, to come out and criticise him again, it's not nice to see. I don't like seeing it. I think I'm sure some of the players in that dressing room don't like to see it either, because...
But what do you think they would do about it?
Well, I mean, what can they do? They're professionals. Their job is to worry about themselves, get themselves on the football pitch and try and play. But there is this thing with Mourinho. I mean, he's a winner. There's no doubt about that. And he's not bothered about dropping someone if they don't pull their weight for the team, and we've seen that with Pogba recently.
I think where I have some sympathy for Shaw is that I think Mourinho has said about that he feels he needs 4, 5, 6 games. That's what he feels he needs. And then openly, the flip side of that, he said, well, I can't give him that. Well, then I think you're going to expect the performances that you're getting. Unless you've been out for that long, you've had a serious injury, you need such a collection of games. I mean, I've been in that position before where I've had a long-term injury. It's taken nearly the same amount of time to get back to the level that I wanted to get back to as a player, and you need the matches.
And just going back to Saturday as well, he talks about how Nemanja Matic was like this island, basically implying that, you know, the rest of the players are all mediocre and we're all underperforming. But why did he have to pick out Shaw? Why Shaw? There were senior players in that team who were underperforming as well. I would think more of him if he went after some of the bigger names in the squad and in the team, rather than the Shaw, who is criticised constantly, who... That injury was horrendous that he came back from, and I think it's a long way back from that mentally as well as physically. And I think that, you know, it's just so predictable.
Well, can you answer that question? Why Shaw?
Because he's an easy target. That's what it looks like. He's an easy one to go after because, yeah, OK, he clearly doesn't rate him as a player, so therefore cut your losses and get rid of him. Sell him this summer. You know, what's he trying to achieve by this constant going after him? I'm not quite sure how that's going to play with everyone at the club. It makes me feel slightly uncomfortable, actually. On Saturday, it felt a little bit too... In isolation, it's OK. And do it once or twice, it's OK. But it's that constant kind of feeling that he's going after him all the time now.
Yeah, I think some players, you can come out and say something and get a reaction, spark a reaction from them, but we've not seen that. And like you say, to keep going after him, it's obviously not have the desired effect to affect his performances in a good way. So it's got to the point now where it's not nice to see.
On this one, though, it almost feels like the act in itself, taking him off at half-time, was punishment enough. Have you been in that situation before?
Yeah, we were just speaking off air. My last game for Tottenham, I got dragged at half-time. There was 2 or 3 of us, I think, away at Newcastle.
At least it was a group thing. Right?
It wasn't
a little bit,
it was an individual, and we went on to lose the game 6-1. So, I mean, as a player, sometimes you have to respect that. I wasn't having a good game. I took it on the chin.
But how did it feel at the time?
I mean, obviously, I was gutted. No player likes to be substituted at half-time. It's a horrible feeling, isn't it? I mean, it's awful, but at the end of the day, I've always been a team player, and if it did have a positive impact on the team, then it's easier to accept.
Happened to you as well?
Yeah, for sure. It happened to me at Arsenal, just breaking into the team, so it was a real blow for me. I was just finding my feet. I'd just starting to really compete with Martin Keown for a place in the team. He was on the bench that day, and I had an absolute shocker, to be honest, and we were 2-0 down against Aston Villa at home at Highbury. Manager had no choice. He brought me off. Martin came on. They won the game 3-2. I didn't play again for probably another 2.5, 3 months.
But did the manager speak to you about why he'd done it, or did he choose to speak about you in the press?
I just remember coming out the shower and walking out the dressing room and him looking at me and saying, "I'm sorry." That was it. And I just shook my head and I just shrugged and went, well, he did what he needed to do to win the game. That was his job.
I mean, I do think, obviously, you know, I'm a football writer and we go to lots of press conferences, cover an awful lot of games. Sometimes you speak afterwards and the manager talks and they just come up with anodyne stuff which does nothing remotely interesting. The one defence of Mourinho, from the sort of our point of view, is that he is appearing to try and explain his decisions.
Trying to engage.
Yeah, he's trying to explain his decisions. I just think that the way he's doing it isn't helping. I think it's OK to try and explain decisions, but you've got to find something constructive within that as well. And he seems to veer from that a little bit. We've had it early in the season where he has said some positives about Shaw in the context of how he's helped him, but then he just leaves him hanging out to dry as well.
I think you have it's interesting. Maybe as a manager at any club, I think you have a responsibility that when you realise you might not be able to get the best out of a player for your team and you utilise them, I think you do your best to help them move on. For the benefit of the individual and for the club as a whole. And it's hard to find that in this situation where where that's how that's happening.
Interesting reaction from a source close to Luke Shaw this afternoon, this evening, which you may have seen on Sky Sports News. To paraphrase, his treatment is an absolute disgrace. If this kind of abuse happened in any other workplace, there would be a case for constructive dismissal. It's disgusting, but Luke's a strong lad and he won't let Mourinho ruin his life. Is that going over the top, do you think?
I think it's a little bit strong, yeah. I mean, obviously, what we're seeing with his direction of trying to get something out of Luke is... He's strong. I mean, Mourinho, he's come out and, like you say, he's criticising him in the press. I personally don't think that's the right way to go about things. I think they're the sort of things you should get the player in the office, explain to him what he's done wrong and speak him through it. I don't feel like Luke should be sitting there hearing it from a press conference before he spoke to the manager individually.
The only thing that is quite hard in that instance is that if he's asked a direct question, we're saying he's asked a direct question because he's actually physically took him off at half-time. So to feel like he couldn't trust him to finish the game, It's quite a strong move, but obviously he's the manager. He's got to do what's best to get the result for the team. But I just feel that you're then going to start making up reasons that aren't true as to why you're bringing a player off, and I think that's a difficult thing to manage.
Well, what's interesting about that comment is do we regard a football dressing room as a different place of work than any other? I mean, the environment's very different, isn't it? But should it be regarded as a similar place of work in any sort of office or any other environment in terms of whether your boss talks to you? I guess, you know, players get shouted at quite a lot. It doesn't tend to happen in the workplace, usually. So, I mean, I think there is a slightly different environment there. But it is an interesting point to make. If he feels that the player's almost been, well, bullied, really, it's a word that some people have used. It's a very strong word to use in the last 24 hours. If you talk about a manager bullying a player, and I think that's quite strong to say that, but if that's the way they feel, then in a work environment, that's quite a serious allegation.
Ryan says he has to leave. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I just for his sake, I think the key that Ryan said is for his happiness and for the freedom to enjoy playing football. Go and enjoy playing football, and you have a chance of regaining your best form at that point. He can't do that while he's at Manchester United.
There might be some, of course, who say that players are just too pampered, can't take a bit of criticism. What would you say to that?
I don't agree with that personally. I think a manager of a football club, they're well within their rights to substitute a player at half-time, but at the same time, I feel like they need to protect their players because that's their team, that's their squad of players, and if you're constantly criticising the player, then you're never going to get the best out of him. So I think from a man management point of view, I don't feel like coming out constantly criticising the player is the best way to go about it.
But just because you're a footballer doesn't make you a robot, does it? You know, you've still got the same human emotions as anyone else, whether or not you're earning lots of money or playing for Manchester United or whatever you're doing. You're still going to react and need to be managed in a certain way and have the same feelings. And you know, I just think that it doesn't matter whether you're a footballer or in any other workplace.
He's a young lad as well, isn't he? I mean, he's got so much to learn. He's got so much to learn in the game, and like you say, him having this period of time not playing football consistently, you just wonder how much of an effect that will have on him further down the line.
Definitely.
I think players are too pampered. I think they're far too lack of accountability. They don't talk enough. I think they don't talk enough in terms of the way games go in the media. They don't say enough. We don't hear from them enough. I think the clubs do cosset them and protect them far too much.
I feel like you get criticised if you come out and say something.
No, not at all. No, I think it's the right environment.
I think nowadays with social media, you say one thing that isn't correct, then there'll be a storm of bad press about you.
Where's the storm come from? Does it come from your own club?
No, I think media, us. I mean, it's talking points, isn't it? I think if you're a player coming out being controversial, then that's stories at the end of the day. I think as a player, your main priority is to perform on the football pitch. I mean, that's the ultimate. That's all you should care about. All the other stuff is irrelevant, really. If you're performing on the football pitch, then that's all that matters.
All I can say is, I mean, I've done hundreds of player interviews, and I can't really think of any that have gone badly in terms of the reaction they've elicited from the supporters and the fans. I think if you do a proper discussion with people and talk about themselves and the football, I think it tends to go down quite well. But to get that access and get them to talk about that is becoming more and more of an issue. I think players shy away from it and clubs shy away from it. I think they see the worst situations. They fear the headlines. They fear the reaction. And they forget that it's their interview, it's their opportunity to talk, and they should try and be a bit more trusting in the whole process.
I think the word pampered, I think maybe protected. It may be overprotected. No, there's a big difference for me, because it's not a lot of it isn't the player's option. You know, the club will want to control that. You go to a club like Manchester United, the media team will want to control everything going in and out, won't they, as you know. So, you know, as a player, and especially as a young player, maybe as you get older, you start to take more responsibility for how you want to be perceived in the public, and that's fine. But
one of the things that said to me today was that Luke Shaw doesn't have the forum in which to talk. You know, Mourinho's done his 12-minute rant last Friday. He's talked and talked and talked again. Luke Shaw hasn't got that forum. Now, maybe the club wouldn't let him do it anyway. But actually, if he did say something, I think it'd be quite interesting.
What would be the consequences of that, though, Jason?
I don't know, exactly. Why should there be any consequences of it? As long as he doesn't come out and say something ridiculous about the club or Mourinho. But if he talked a bit about himself and how he felt about his football, I think it'd be quite interesting. I think people are quite interested in that.
I'm sure he may well do that in time. I think probably at the moment he's still in a phase where you're caught. Maybe. You know, at the moment, that for a young person, that's very difficult to do. So I'm sure in time that will come out, and he will, you know, when he's at the right place and capable of expressing it in the right way, I'm sure he may well do that.
It's a bit of a boxing match when your hands are tied behind your back, your manager's punching you, but you can't lay one blow on him. Yeah,
I mean, he's probably sitting there wishing he could come out and say something, but I think for his career, that's not going to do him any good. I think if you're going to come out and start criticising the manager, and there's a football club looking to sign Luke Shaw in the next 6 months, then I don't see how that's going to have a positive impact on his career.
Just a word on Mourinho's general demeanour.
Yeah.
The high of beating Liverpool, then the low of Sevilla, and then the press conference on Friday, and then this Luke Shaw thing. How would you evaluate all that?
I think he's, you know, it's very... I mean, I've covered his career a lot. Obviously, when he first arrived at Chelsea, I was there for the I Am the Special One press conference. I've tracked his whole career since then. To me, you know, a bit of the magic's gone. I really do believe that he's not quite, you know, on top of his game anymore. I think, and I got a lot of criticism for writing this at the time, when he went to Manchester United, he feels to me like he's playing the football of 5-10 years ago, when managers like Klopp, Guardiola, and Pochettino are moving away from him. You know, I think that style has gone, and I think often a lot of the things he's saying and doing now feel a little bit dated to me, and I just don't feel... Personally, I'd never felt that he was the right manager for Manchester United. I understand why they got him, because of the personality and the size of the character. That club is a very difficult club to manage, an extremely difficult club to manage, and I think that's partly why they got Louis van Gaal before him, because they thought he was a big character. And obviously Mourinho fits that bill. But I just don't feel as if he's progressing the club the way they need to go.
Do you think that style goes out of date?
I do.
You actually think there's a time stamp on that?
I think football has moved on. I think football is much more front foot. I think it's about attacking football much more now. The best teams are going for it. They're going out and attacking, trying to score more goals in the opposition, not worrying about stopping the opposition.
But his best teams had to go and attack and score goals. The success he had, they weren't just sat there defending. For
let's not forget he won a European Cup last year and the League Cup. I mean,
Europa League last year.
Yeah, we're talking of Klopp, we're talking Pep and Tottenham, the way they play. They didn't win anything. I mean, I'm a fan of the style of football. It's the best football to watch. But Mourinho's a winner. Man United are used to winning trophies, and they've brought him in his first season, and he's won 2 trophies. So there's the argument that they've gone a few years without winning big trophies. He's come in and he's done that. I mean, I agree with you in terms of his style of football isn't the Manchester United way that we're used to. But United were on I wouldn't say a downward spiral, but since Ferguson left...
They definitely were.
Yeah, I mean, and I do feel like he took Man United up to that level of one of the top clubs in England again.
And if they finish second and win the FA Cup this season, then they can argue that's progress as well. But the problem is, if you take away those trophies, and obviously that's a big if, you're not often left with an awful lot in terms of the football. And I've got to say, I've seen this before with him at Chelsea. The people at Chelsea told me, you take away the winning, and obviously the winning's a huge thing, but when he stops winning, there's not an awful lot left to love.
You could just... But there hasn't been a lot of time lapse between the winning, though, has there? I think that's the point. And that, for me, I understand the criticism of his style. And we can all sit there and criticise the style about whatever, but... You're talking... I mean, he says in his interview, 10 months since the trophy came through the door. So... You know, is that the marker that he set? That if he goes longer than 10 months...
In a competition, which he said he didn't want to be involved with when he was at Chelsea, it's a competition he didn't value at all, and he ridiculed managers who are involved in that competition.
Because he's in the Champions League.
Obviously, the competition has changed because of the Champions League place at the end of it.
Yeah.
But it's not like a senior competition in his own eyes, and obviously he's dressed it up much more... Listen, I'm not going to destroy Jose Mourinho, but... His trophy winning, the major trophies, obviously he won the league a couple of years ago with Chelsea, fantastic, but the major trophies, a lot of them are now it's more towards the first half of his career. Since 2010, he's not done brilliantly in the Champions League. That competition's gone away from him a little bit. You know, and I think he's got to try and adapt and change. Personally, I think.
There could be 1 or 2 interesting stories coming out of this international week, because as we know, these players disperse around the world, and then people like Jason get hold of them in little corners and ask them mean questions, and they sometimes give some very interesting responses. Didier Deschamps has been speaking today, the French national manager, about Paul Pogba and his problems at Manchester United this year too, and sort of saying that he's going to have to build his confidence up over the next week because he's been really struggling. Do you think, going back to this debate that you were having, which I was very much enjoying sitting back and listening to, do you think, Ryan, that Mourinho's Manchester United will be winning the title next season?
I don't believe so, no. Personally. I think I look
Isn't that the objective, though?
Yeah, of course it is. It's Manchester United. They're arguably the biggest club in England. That's what they need. But, I mean, Jason said, you look at Pep at City, I mean, Liverpool, Tottenham. The league is very difficult, and I think the way United have gone in the last sort of 2 or 3 months, in terms of performances, I know they've been digging out results, but I think that squad of players, they're going to have a massive overhaul of players if they're going to challenge for the title next year.
Matt?
I think it's a very difficult question to answer right now because things can change so quickly. So as it stands right now, I agree with Ryan. Then you look at it and say there's no chance they are going to beat a...
Do you think they need a massive overhaul then, as Ryan says?
No, I honestly think it has potential to click together, but I kind of feel that it lies at the hands of Mourinho and how he's... I mean, I can't speak about his perception of how he comes across inside the club because we never see it. But all you see is from the outside. And I just see him as being different in terms of his demeanour, how he is. And I don't know if you can then go on a winning streak being like that. I mean, he might be completely different when he's inside the dressing room and the training pitch. I don't know. But from what I see, he just seems a bit down and a bit flat. And his press conference will probably reflect that.
So some insights on this, Jason, from you, please. The suggestion from him is that the board, his superiors, are right there with him on all of this stuff. Is that the case?
Yeah, and I think they are. I mean, you've got to remember they've recently given him a new contract. So I mean, that's a show of faith in itself. In saying that, he's often left fairly soon after signing new contracts at other clubs. I think they feel that they knew what they were getting with Mourinho. You know, there is the good and the bad. Obviously, Ryan's talked about the trophies. Yes, absolutely. He's moved them up the table. There is progress there. The downside, obviously, is what we've seen with some of the performances, and also some of the reaction from him and the way he's behaved. You've got to live with that, basically. And the constant demand for more money, the constant demand for spending more money, and the constant carping about his rivals and the money they've spent. And that becomes quite wearing at a club. But I think there is faith with him. I think they believe he still can be the manager they want him to be and bring back the title to Manchester United. I think he got the job in the first place because Guardiola got the Manchester City job. And I think Manchester United thought, this man, who can stop Pep Guardiola? Well, he did it before in Spain. Maybe this is the right man for us, Jose Mourinho. We'll get him to come. And I think that's what got him the job in the first place. So I don't think they're going to give up on him. Not yet.
I hope not, because I do wonder on nights like this what we do without him. Exactly. It always comes back to Jose Mourinho.